I do not condone nor support any actions presented in this book. If you or someone you know is considering suicide, please call or text 988. Without further ado, the death. For your ease of reading, I typed up the whole book after I read it so you don't have to decipher my ancient hieroglyphic handwriting. Here we go. First, let's read the table of contents. Chapter 1, New School. Chapter 2, Grandma's House. Chapter 3, Pokemon New. Author, first name, last name. Illustrated by first name, last name. Chapter 1, My name is Fred. I'm going to a new school. The school is called Death. I'm scared because it is called Death and it is short for die. Fred, called Fred's mom. Dinner is ready. Oh, Mom, replied Fred. Yum! Tacos for dinner. I'm done, said Fred. I want a treat. Fred said his mom. What? You did not eat any food. I'm not hungry, replied Fred. If you're not hungry, you cannot eat a treat. And that's when the trouble began. That night, when Fred slept, he had a bad dream. His dream was his mom boiled him for not eating any dinner. The next morning, Fred got up early because it was his first day of 4th grade. He went to school after he ate his cereal, and he was eating when he muttered, I need a fact gun to bring to school. Can anyone decipher this? He went on the big bus, and he sat next to a kid who did not like him. The kid hit him, and Fred threw him out the window. He fell on the road, and the bus driver did not see him, so the bus driver ran him over. Fred laughed, and the police saw. The police stopped the bus and shot the bus driver. Headshot, said one of the policemen, and one policeman drove the kids to school. Then they arrived to school. When Fred got off the bus, the policeman that said headshot gave me a $1 million bill. I see we've changed to first person. I think this is real because I still have the $1 million bill. He gave it to me because I was so impressed that he died. He was a bad guy that escaped from prison. But when I was walking to school, I wondered why the policeman shot the bus driver. Yeah. Before I went to class, I met the principal. She was fat and she said, "Hi, welcome to Death School." I almost fainted. Her name was Miss Dill and she looked like this. She's got some skinny legs, low-key. Chapter 2. I shot the fat principal with my fact gun and ran to my classroom. I met my new teacher. His name was Mr. Fat. I almost called the police to shoot me. Holy shit. Okay. And then we've got this on the next page. Roblox Theme Park Tycoon. And I drew like a singular line there. Is that it? Seriously? Let's read something else now that doesn't need a disclaimer. If you've already seen part 1, this is the book that was inspired by that. I think the other one I made was also called The Arcade, and both of the characters ended up being named Max by coincidence. This book was for my 7th or 8th grade independent writing class. The last one I wrote in 4th grade. Chapter 1, The Room. Max walked down the sidewalk. He had $20 in his pocket that he'd gotten for his birthday. He turned a corner, and the colorful lights of the arcade burst through the window. It was nighttime. The sky was cloudy, but the moon still illuminated the area around him. Max started running. The arcade wouldn't close for another 2 hours, but $20 was more than enough to last a while. Every day at exactly 8 p.m., he would go to the arcade. Sometimes he had $10 or $5 or even $30. A car passed by, then he crossed the street to the arcade. He was 7 minutes late. He was immediately blasted with the sounds of arcade games. Walking up to one of the machines, a face appeared on the screen. I was wondering where you were, it said with a smile. Max pressed the $20 option and put the money into the machine. A card was dispensed, and Max grabbed it. He never talked to the machine, but it would always greet him. He had hated machines ever since his best friend died. He was devastated when he learned that a human-like robot who his friend was working on was assumed to have purposefully electrocuted his friend. The robot ran away, never to be seen again. Max walked down the small set of stairs, blue carpets with planets and stars covering them. He was now in a big room with 2 floors of arcade machines, VRs, and even a cinema. He walked up to the only game he ever played, a realistic first-person shooter. He loved the game because you shoot robots. When he walked up to the game, it was out of order. There was a small sign on it that said, "Game needs an update, come back soon." I know what game this is, I don't think I've ever seen it get an update. Max frowned and turned towards the entrance. He didn't care about any other game in the arcade. Something caught his eye, however. A boarded up door with a "Do Not Enter" sign. Oh, this is just like the first book. There's no such thing as magic. And before Carter could stop him, he ran to the boarded room and started taking off the boards with a thing that magically appeared. He walked up to the door, wondering what could be in there. There was an old, dusty label above the door. Max reached up and removed the dust. It read, Experiment Room 1. Max blinked, and the label was gone. He looked around, making sure nobody was watching him, and slowly removed the boards from the door. For some reason, the boards were glued to the door instead of nailed, almost as if someone had recently opened it, so it was fairly easy to remove them. Why? Same issue I had with the first book. A child goes into an arcade and sees a boarded up door and is like, holy shit, I gotta get in there. Max piled the boards into a small closet near the door, almost getting caught, but ducking behind a game before anyone could see him. After walking back to the door, he turned the handle. The door made a loud creaking sound, so Max quickly opened and shut the door. There were lights on in the room, which Max found bizarre. The room was tall and very long, and there were tons of spiderwebs littered around its ceiling. Max walked backward slowly, and he put his hand on the doorknob. He turned it, but the door didn't open. It was locked. Max pulled out his phone, but the percent was dropping by 1 every second. He tried to call 911, but his phone died right after he started the call. Max knocked on the door and even tried to break it down, but nothing worked. He decided there may be another way out, so he walked to the other side of the room. He saw many metal containers, but the largest one had been broken out. He saw that it was the same company that his friend had worked for, and a chill went down his spine. He opened one of the containers just to see if there was anything he should be concerned about escaping from one of them. He only found badly damaged parts of robots and a bunch of wires. He opened another crate and was met with the same thing. I just realized something. Why is this arcade experimenting? And why do they label it experiment room? He opened more and more crates until he found the head of a robot, which was still somehow on. The robot screamed, which made Max scream, and Max backed into something that was covered with a sheet. It fell down to reveal an old arcade game. It's just like the first book! Max ran over to the crate and shut it. His hands were hurting from opening the heavy metal crates. He heard something behind him and discovered that the arcade machine he had bumped into was on. There was an ineligible title. There was an illegible title, mostly because it was glitching. There was some generic controls, such as a joystick, a fire button, and a reload button. There was also a start button, which Max decided to press out of curiosity. The screen glitched, and a distorted song played. A small person was on the screen, in the middle of what looked like a pixelated field. The sky was black, and Max saw the pixelated person go down a set of stairs. Max had a weird feeling in his stomach. He could see what looked like a glitchy meteor hit the ground just after the person went underground. The floor around the person glitched, and he could see that they started running. The glitch caught up with them, and red text flashed on the screen that said, "Run." Max grabbed the joystick and moved it to the right, away from the glitch. There was a voice. As it got louder, a sad feeling rushed through him. It sounded like his friend. It kept saying run, and Max fought the joystick as it started to go back to its original position. Max stepped away from the machine, his friend's voice ringing in his head. He tried to shut off the machine, but it shocked him. Max kicked the machine, the air around him feeling hot. He looked down at his hands. They were turning into small squares and going into the game. Max tried to run, shouting for help. He was picked up into the air, and head first, he went into the screen of the game. Max expected to wake up in the hospital. He must have gotten electrocuted. He hoped and hoped that he didn't suffer the same fate as his friend. He also hoped it might have just been a dream. When he opened his eyes, Max was in the middle of a corn maze. The sun looked like it would set any minute, and Max couldn't believe what had just happened. He was sure it was a dream, since he definitely wasn't in a corn maze before. It had been years since he'd ever been in one. He looked around, closed his eyes, said goodbye, and pinched himself. He felt it. Max opened his eyes again. The birds were still chirping. The corn was still rustling in the wind. Max shouted for help. He looked up and saw a big timer. It was counting down from 1 minute. He looked around the maze. He would have to get out. A scarecrow pointing to one entrance of the maze stared blankly at him. Deciding that he must have died or something, Max decided to go the way the scarecrow was leading him. The timer was at 30 seconds. Max ran, taking random turns, stopping to catch his breath. He turned another corner, 10 seconds on the clock. He'd gone in a circle. 10, 9, 8, 5, 4, 3, whatever. Max picked up the scarecrow, pointing the wooden part of it into the air as a weapon. 1, 0. The sun had set. Max could see the moon rising, casting an eerie glow on the maze. Max turned around 360 degrees. He had expected to see something, but there was nothing. All he could see was a dark version of the corn maze. He calmed down, closing his eyes and breathing deeply. He could see a red light. He opened his eyes. Sure enough, there was red text floating in front of him. Wave 1, it read. Max's whole body filled with fear. What was it going to be? Zombies? Vampires? Evil scarecrows? He heard a particularly loud rustling in the corn. It was just the wind, however, he ran. More text popped up, but he ran right through it, still holding the scarecrow he found at the entrance. He ran straight through the corn. After 30 seconds or so of running, he was somehow back at the start. He could hear something, and he turned to see his friend, standing right in front of him. "We have to get out of here," his friend said. Max couldn't believe his eyes. "You died," Max said, pointing the scarecrow at him. Tears started rushing down his face. "That's what I thought, but I ended up here." Max did not buy this explanation. Unless his consciousness somehow transferred into the game, Max couldn't see one reason why this could be true. Right after he gave a reason why it could be true. Sure, he didn't know how he was sucked into the game in the first place, but his friend's excuse seemed even less believable. "I know how to get out of here, but you have to put down the scarecrow," said his friend. Instead of doing that, Max threw it at him, and everything turned black. He could move, he could think, but he couldn't see anything. Something was walking toward him, its footsteps exactly 1.2 seconds apart. There was a loud click as a bright light illuminated the dark room he was in. Max could see the robot that killed his friend walking toward him. Chapter 2, The Robot. Breaking news, the first artificial intelligence has just been created. The TV turned off. Tyler noticed this, unlike everything else, who were too busy celebrating and eating cake. They had done it. They had created the first artificial intelligence. Tyler walked up to the TV and hit it. Someone had turned it off. His phone vibrated. He checked it, and he could see his best friend was calling him. He walked into another room and answered the call. It was his friend, Max. "Wow, you actually finished it?" "It wasn't just me. We all worked on it." "But still..." "Yeah, it is pretty cool." "Can I see it?" "Yeah, I could turn it on." "Okay, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Bye." "Bye." Tyler put his phone back in his pocket. He walked over to the room where the robot was. He walked into the control room. Since he worked on it, he knew how to turn it on, and he figured it would be just fine. He turned on the robot, not noticing a few sparks coming out of the generators. A red warning light flashed. He ran into the control room and tried to shut off the robot, but at that moment, it stood up and walked into the room with him. Tyler turned around and screamed. The robot knocked Tyler to the ground, then turned a dial up. The generators burst into flames, and Tyler was electrocuted. The robot left. When Max arrived, there were fire trucks outside, and smoke was pouring out the windows. Max looked around for his friend before trying to run into the building. He was stopped, so he snuck through the back way. The back way? Is that a word? Jumping over the burning parts of the roof, he made his way to where he knew his friend would be. He looked through the window on his way there. The robot was gone. Max assumed they had taken it out of the building. He finally got up to the control room door, the smoke getting worse. It was a small fire, but it was spreading quickly. The door to the control room was shut, and it was on fire. Max grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher, and when it was safe, entered the room. He could see his friend lying unconscious on the floor. He tried to wake up Tyler, but when that failed, he tried to drag him out of the building. They were close to the exit, away from the main area where the fire was spreading. Max dragged his friend over to the ambulance, and they rushed him to the hospital. It was too late. They didn't find the robot, and they assumed Tyler was murdered by it. Didn't the building burn down? Chapter 3, Not Alone. The robot walked closer and closer to Max, his head filled with memories, some good and some bad. Max ran from the robot into the darkness. Another light turned on. Max kept running. His legs were tired and his breath was fast, but he kept running. He reached a door and tried to open it. It was locked. Max waited for the robot to walk up to him. Maybe this was a dream. Maybe he would just wake up. The robot started to sprint. Max closed his eyes. The door opened and someone pulled him inside. There was a loud banging on the door. "We have to run," someone said, and Max opened his eyes. He saw a tall boy with blonde hair and green eyes. "Who are you?" Max asked the boy. "No time for that. We have to run." Max and the boy ran down a set of concrete stairs, the walls neon white. The door fell down the middle of the stairs, which caused them to run faster. They reached a set of doors and went through one with a yellow light under it. Max could see two other people, one of which he recognized as a boy from his school named Scott. They turned the lights out and held their breath as the robot ran down the stairs. They waited a minute, and after the robot went back up the stairs, they turned the lights on. "I'm Jack," said the boy with blonde hair. "This is Scott," he pointed to Scott. "And I'm not sure who this is," he pointed to the other boy sitting in the corner. "He doesn't talk much." Max was still confused. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Same reason as you. We got curious." Max realized what big of a mistake he had made. He was about to ask a question when the ground shook. It only shook for a few seconds, but parts of the ceiling fell. The lights turned off, and they could hear the robot running down the stairs. "We need to go!" shouted Jack. The 3 kids ran, and realizing they left the quiet one behind, Scott went back for him. They ran down the stairs, skipping a step every few seconds. Meanwhile, Scott was helping the kid get up, since he had gotten hurt in what they thought was an earthquake. The staircase seemed to get smaller as they ran. They could skip more and more steps the further they went, and they realized it was because the stairs were getting smaller. Everything was shrinking. They stayed the same size, and Max was starting to hyperventilate. They reached a door at the bottom. "That door's always been locked. We're done for," said Jack. Max tried to turn the small doorknob. To both of their amazement, it opened. They just fit through. On the other side of the doorway, there were what looked like plans for something. There were drawings and maps, and even some missing posters up on the walls, which were made out of brick. I assume the walls are brick and not the missing posters. Max and Jack crept through the room, occasionally glancing at a missing poster or a map, or even just a hole in the wall. They started to run once they heard footsteps down the stairs. The room was more of a long hallway, with many doors leading to who knows where. The doors didn't have doorknobs, so they couldn't hide in any of them. They heard the robot coming closer and began to run. Max decided they should try their luck breaking down the door. He started kicking the door, and Jack joined in. Something was keeping the robot busy. The door started to break. After they managed to break the door, they jumped through it. Chapter 4, Escape. Max and Jack opened their eyes, then shielded them from the bright ceiling lights. They had escaped. Well, most of them. Scott and the other kid were still in the game. They waited for their arms and legs to fully turn back from squares. They both got up and looked at the screen of the game. Scott was trying to fight the robot. Meanwhile, the other kid was running for the door. The robot must have decided it wasn't worth it, and just took Scott after knocking him out. The other kid jumped through the door and appeared on the floor behind them. They walked up to him and started asking if he was okay and if he needed anything. Instead of a normal answer, he just responded with, "We have to go back for him." Max knew he was right. They had to go back. They didn't know that the fate of the world would soon be in their hands. To be continued, maybe. I don't think I continue this. I liked the original better. I also, linked the book for my teacher, the first one, which you can see in this video. Yeah. I think I can read one more book. All right, this is a quick one, but I did kind of like it. Jack frowned as he turned to the gas station. He had a long trip ahead of him. Jack is nearing his 300th birthday, and that means he needs a piece of his artificial heart replaced and more memory storage. It is 2365, and the Fifth World War is still going on. Prices for artificial hearts and memory have skyrocketed as the world quickly runs out of natural resources, a simple plastic fork costing nearly $2 billion. Jack isn't a villain, neither is he mean, but everyone is scared of him because of his spiked mask. 100 years ago, ashamed by his decaying face, he bought a mask with a new pair of eyes. He thought it would make him look smart, but instead, it made him look like the type of guy who robs banks every day for fun. It's not that easy to rob banks, however, ever since all of the paper money was uploaded online in the most secure server in the world, which only 2 people have access to. Fred had put the mask on, not knowing that the mask would attach itself to his face forever. Over the years, he had never been able to get a single friend because of his looks and the loud buzzing sound that his artificial lungs made whenever he breathed, which would drive any person crazy if they heard it for too long. 200 years of not talking to anyone and everyone running away at the sight of him made him bitter, and he was starting to believe that he should just be what everyone else already thought he was. He robbed a convenience store exactly 2 months ago, but had immediately been arrested by 4 police robots. He had been charged with attempted robbery and sent to prison for 1 month. If you don't think 1 month is that bad, you haven't seen the prison they sent him to. At the prison, they made him mine for coal in the southern part of the prison. Most of the coal at that prison had been mined, so he had to go in an elevator about 5 minutes down. The old steel elevator creaked and shouted as it went down. When What the fuck? When Jack finally arrived at the mine, he was told by 2 young police officers to grab a pickaxe made of cheap materials, still costing around $5 million, and began mining. He mined for hours, and with little to no luck. The most expensive thing he had found was a small stone, which the guards took immediately and told him to keep mining. Unfortunately, this is not the worst thing that happened to him in prison, and you'll see why soon. Once it was 8 p.m., the guards let him put down the pickaxe. Sweating and lightheaded, Jack put it down and collapsed, a robot carrying him back to his cell. Since he was a low-risk prisoner, he was put into the northeastern side of the main building, a long row of cold, stone cells filled with pickpocketers and small store robbers. He was put in a cell with 4 other prisoners, 2 of which had only stolen pocket change from a few people, one of them trying to rob the same small store Jack had tried to burgle, and a big man with tattoos all over his arms, who nobody asked what he did. After examining the cell, Jack was surprised to see that there were no beds and 1 toilet, made out of stone. The other prisoners were scared of Jack, except for the big one. and Jack had figured out his name was Daniel. Jack slept on the cold ground, which wasn't that bad, because of the normal outside temperature being a warm 100 degrees all year, even in winter. Jack had heard of snow, but had only seen it once when he was 6 years old. Still, he remembered what snow looked like, tasted like, and felt like, and wished that humans had stopped global warming. Thinking about snow, Jack suddenly felt very miserable and fell asleep. When he woke up in the morning, he walked into a large cafeteria with hundreds of prisoners. A few fights broke out, but when one of the prisoners hit another prisoner, a robot on the ceiling would sense it, come out of the shadows, and tase both of them. Jack found out that what food you get depends on what you mind, and a few lucky prisoners got to have steak or pancakes, while he only got a dry peanut butter sandwich and some tasteless, salty plant. This has to be a reference to a story I read in my first video. After breakfast, he headed back down to the mine. He mined for hours and hours until finally he found something. A small shiny rock had fallen to the ground, and the guards examined it with great curiosity. "Do you really think this is?" said one of the guards. "No way, it can't be, there's none left," said the other. They walked over to the other two guards next to him, watching another prisoner, and showed them the small rock. One of the guards grabbed it quickly and went up the elevator to who knows where. That's it! Dude, I submitted this? I didn't even finish it! If you guys want more, insane creative writing stories, so I can make more, thank you for watching.